Arcane has now done the impossible not once, but twice. First, in breaking away from the video game curse, convincing me to watch an adaptation that on paper had every reason to be terrible. And second, living up to the ridiculous standards set by Season 1 with huge audience expectations, tons of studio pressure, and less time. Season 2, Act 1 of Arcane was released, and it's living up to the hype. While there are some small parts of it that I struggled with, overall the product is fantastic. And it's all been built around a very unique release model that's becoming more popular. Because in a world of binge watching and water cooler discussion, Arcane has magically found the Goldilocks zone. My name is Pei, and today we're talking about the new 3-episode rule. Back when I was releasing video essays on my other channel, the first I ever made was about Arcane, and it was immediately successful. However, it definitely took me a while before the video essay thing stuck. One of the benefits of making video essays is you get to attach onto these magnificent pieces of art that other people care about just as much as you do. Season 1 of Arcane was fantastic, but it had 6 years of development. It's a drastically different experience to be an underdog versus a favorite. Expectations surrounding an animated video game adaptation of League of Legends were either non-existent or low. Then Season 1 came along, and those who gave it a shot kept saying the same thing: it really is worth watching. And much like Into the Spider-Verse, Season 1 of Arcane solidified itself as not only a popular triumph, but also a critical success. It held up in a vacuum, not alienating people who were unfamiliar with League of Legends. I was worried that Season 2 wasn't going to be able to meet the standards it had set in Season 1, but so far with the release of the first act, it has. Which brings up the way this show is released. Season 1 and Season 2 are airing 3-episode acts at a time, with intention to service both pop culture consumption and the story itself. So let's explore both. How this 3-episode release lends itself to marketing and viewer experience, while also embracing Western storytelling structure. Today's video is brought to you by Surfshark. I'm not joking when I say that I've been using this VPN for years before they approached me for a sponsorship. The reason I chose Surfshark years ago is because when I did research, I found that they offered so much for such an affordable price. And in my time using their services, I haven't once considered switching to a different VPN. Virtual private networks are incredibly useful. Did you know that a US Crunchyroll account won't be available if you're visiting Japan? With a VPN, you can quickly connect through a server in the United States, accessing the entire catalog that you're used to. Crunchyroll's library is actually greatly limited in any country outside of the US or Canada. So using a VPN, you can potentially get access to hundreds of more options of anime you can actually watch. VPNs can also protect you from price discrimination. Airline websites that you visited previously sometimes can upcharge on the same ticket you looked at yesterday, based off of things like cookies and your IP address. This also applies to those targeted ads that can tell you the exact location and city you're living in. Protecting your IP gives people less tools to utilize against you. So if you're interested in trying Surfshark, signing up with the link in my description below will give you an extra 4 months. If you're still on the fence, consider looking into their 30-day money-back guarantee policy. Once again, a very special thanks to Surfshark for sponsoring today's video and making this content more stable for the future. There are multiple perspectives you could approach this 3-episode release schedule from. The first is as a product. This is a show that many people have invested a ton of time, energy, and money into. But the second perspective is looking at this show as a piece of art. This story is the byproduct of tons of effort and passion. And in many ways, I think both as a piece of art and as a product, Arcane has benefited from this 3-episode release schedule. There are many reasons Arcane exists, but at the foundation is the fact that it's a good marketing tool. Riot is first and foremost a gaming company that is trying to draw people in to play more of its games. That's why Arcane was given a $250 million budget. And that money is absolutely a tool that enables creators to tell their story, but it also comes with tons of pressure. There were lots of responsibilities that had to be factored in when each episode was being written. Avoiding Season 2 spoilers here, one of my primary criticisms of the first act of Season 2 was there were times that dialogue felt very plastic and forced, functioning as heavy-handed exposition. It felt so jarring to me, especially in context because it was surrounded by outstandingly executed parts. But then a conversation with a friend clarified some things. Arcane isn't just a show, it's marketing for 5 games. Riot is advertising for League of Legends, Teamfight Tactics, Wild Rift, Valorant, and their new game 2XKO. They're working with streamers, they're doing live premieres, they're trying to create a scenario for this show to have as big of a cultural impact as possible, which means creating dialogue for those who don't remember Season 1 very well, or maybe didn't even watch Season 1. There were lots of first-time viewers in Twitch streams, whether or not it was with individual creators or the premiere. For me, I was so fixated on this story and Arcane as a piece of art that I didn't consider all the money that went into the production and where it came from. Part of the reason this is so important is because if the first episode is incredibly focused on exposition, that would be very disappointing as a singular release. But these episodes were written in acts, 3 episodes across 2 hours that most people would watch in a single sitting, meaning they could treat it like a movie. We'll get back to that in a little bit. 3 is a magic number in the West. The 3-act play, the rule of threes, even in places you wouldn't expect like high school English essay writing or triptychs. Presenting things in groups of 3 is incredibly common, especially in Western media. Season 1 of Arcane was 3 acts, 3 episodes each released across 3 weeks. Part of this is Arcane's 40-minute episode length. 2 hours is a nice round number, the upper length of a movie, what you can expect someone to sit and watch in one night. They're releasing on Saturdays, so people are available to watch. They're coordinating marketing campaigns in all of their games and across multiple social media platforms. 3 episodes also give enough information to where you can discuss it every week without being overwhelmed by the entire season. But because it's just a couple weeks, it's easy to stay in the zeitgeist spotlight. There were very few shows that were regularly talked about weekly across years. Shows like Game of Thrones and maybe Breaking Bad were exceptions, so good that they could stay in the public attention over long periods of time. But on the opposite side of the spectrum, shows like Stranger Things and Squid Games released entire seasons in a single night, but this led to them being a flash in the pan. Overwhelmingly huge, but over such a short period of time, for some reason it felt like it didn't have the impact it should have. These 3-episode releases find a balance between the two. Frieren, a show I built this entire channel around for a big portion of time, is another really good example. Its premiere released 4 episodes that were a total length of 2 hours. I believe almost every piece of media that had major pop culture influence was built off of a foundation of a strong pilot. There are some exceptions, but this proves surprisingly true in anime. I think that Frieren's 4-episode premiere was a major contributor to its success, that in conjunction with its execution. For Arcane, 2 hours of content leaves you so much to discuss, so much to explore. There are hundreds of videos, short form and long, on TikTok, YouTube, and many other platforms being made right now talking about Arcane. Some of them are just AMVs highlighting the beautiful animation. And this also happened in Season 1. There's this great video essayist named Schnee who had a start right around the same time I did. I first found him when we both made videos about Arcane that were popular after Season 1. I remember him so vividly because while I occasionally had videos do well, he had a career on YouTube when I didn't. In a lot of ways, I looked at him as a contemporary, but also an example of a more successful pursuit. And I do believe a big portion of that, especially in the beginning, can be attributed to Arcane, just like how my channel gained most of its attention through videos about Frieren. And while Arcane's marketing is fantastic, it's ultimately a piece of art first. Schnee's initial success on YouTube came solely from posting about Arcane, finding interesting and compelling things to explore each time. He was able to highlight lots of parts of what made it such a fantastic story. So as much as these 3-episode releases contributed to the marketing of Arcane, I'm more interested in how it contributed to the art. Because ultimately, even given its foundation as a marketing tool, Arcane is a fantastic story first. So let's explore the story. Spoiler warning for Season 2, Act 1. Something I was very concerned about coming into Season 2 of Arcane was how they were going to handle the expectations and pressure. Making something that's really good is hard, but making something that's really good again is harder, especially when everyone around you has high expectations. But with the release of Act 1, a lot of my nerves have gone. While Season 2 of Arcane still has a lot of room to mess up, I'm fascinated by the peaks it's already achieved. So looking at these 3 episodes, what was each one's goal? To oversimplify, the first episode was setup, the second was building pressure, and the third was an explosion. These 3 episodes and the way they play out loosely emulates the structure and dynamics of a movie. There's that 17-page rule that an inciting incident is supposed to happen by 17 minutes. In Act 1 of Season 2, it happens after 20. What's really interesting though is that Arcane's working with a lot of restrictions. I actually want to make an entire video someday about how Arcane is working around this really tricky issue in the fact that League has a predetermined lore. Because Arcane's writers were given a very difficult task of having to create a story built around characters with established endings. They then have to make those stories surprising, engaging, and more than anything satisfying. Anyone who's played League of Legends knows that the Victor we're seeing in Season 1 is very, very different than the Victor we see in game. But one of the most impressive parts of Season 2 to me so far is how much they've broken away from the direction I expected them to go. Creating unique stories, challenging this preconception that I have any idea where this show is gonna go. A good example of this is starting with Powder and ending with Jinx. It's kind of the foundation of the entire first act in season 1. This sweetheart of a young girl who becomes a monster, unstable and dangerous. And I think act 1 of season 2 is built around a similar descent, this time of Caitlyn, becoming this figurehead violent military leader who's pursuing vicious retribution for the wrongs that have been done to her. The parallels are really interesting. Two monsters that we care about deeply as characters, ones we relate to because of the exact same hardships that made them so jaded. What's magnificent about both is I knew the characters we were starting with and I couldn't figure out how they were going to become the characters we'd eventually know. But then the path and answers that we were given were not only surprising, but also very satisfying. I feel the exact same way about Jace and Victor, actually many characters in the story. The way they set up Piltover's eventual aggression, the conflict between the council, Mel's pushback against the militarization of Hextech. Everyone struggled to navigate the constant escalation of force. It's amazing how Arcane, despite having clear goalposts, is able to avoid that contrived feeling that comes with stories that are working towards a very specific end. And the story is supported by the 3-episode release. I'm so excited for Act 2, especially considering all the things I still want to talk about from Act 1. Last week I made a video about stylism, and Arcane is a great example of unique style and execution, but it's not just innovating in its form. I think a lot of people are going to start adopting this system. Streaming services aren't going anywhere, so this new 3-episode rule I think will be adopted because it not only serves the audience and marketing, but it can also be used to enhance the art. Cinema used to be the primary way in which innovation was formed in film, but that's been changing for a while, and I think that Arcane just set a new standard.